in the 4th year of my marriage to Silas. His former lover divorced and returned to her home country. To make matters worse, I was diagnosed with cancer and was dying. In the less than 6 months I had left, I continued to play the role of Silas's devoted wife, until I passed away. After reading the diary I left behind, Silas completely broke down, holding the thin diagnosis letter. I stood at the hospital entrance, wanting to call Silas. The contact list appeared on the screen, but I tapped it and then backed out. His phone number popped up first. His voice was as low and cold as ever, but he softened it slightly when he called my name. Lynn, I have something to do tonight and won't be coming home for dinner. I might be back late, so go to bed early. All the words were stuck in my throat. All right. As always. It was brief. The line went dead, but I remained in the position of holding the phone. The setting sun was blood red on the horizon. Silas and I had been married for 4 years, and I had liked him for nearly 10 years. I was lucky. Silas was being pressured by his family to marry, so he went on blind dates everywhere and happened to meet me. We both had decent looks, so we decided to just get married. Silas needed a wife, and I was the perfect fit. He's a cold-hearted person who doesn't talk much, doesn't show his emotions, and rarely has any expression. I've been holding on to this ice for 2 years, finally waiting for it to melt for me. We started to become like a normal couple, living in the mundane details of daily life, slowly turning into the ideal version of myself. But now, this short-lived dream is about to be shattered. Today, the doctor confirmed that I have pancreatic cancer. I also know that today is the day his former lover, Tanya, is returning, so he was busy ignoring my calls to meet the woman he loves. I didn't eat and waited for him in the living room for a long time. I waited until it was late at night. And when the living room door opened, I was startled awake from my drowsy state. Silas carefully closed the door and walked softly. The moment the living room light turned on, our eyes met. He paused for a moment, then furrowed his brows. Why aren't you asleep yet? I accidentally fell asleep in the living room. I smiled at him, having woken up at the sound of his voice. Silas hummed in response, his expression calm. I walked over to take his coat. The scent of sandalwood mixed with gardenias wafted into my nose, making me feel nauseous. This was Tanya's favorite flower scent. On the day I was diagnosed with a terminal illness, my husband drove to pick him up and bring him back to the country. I should have asked him, but I just opened my mouth and said nothing. It was as if nothing had happened. The next day, I still got up early and went to make breakfast for Silas as usual. Silas had a stomach condition. When it was severe, he was hospitalized for half a month, and I stayed by his side the entire time. The doctors and nurses at the hospital all said he had found a good wife. Silas sat on the hospital bed, looking tired and listless, his gaze on me unmoving. When we were alone in the ward, he spoke again. Hiring a caregiver would be the same. My motion of peeling the fruit paused, and the intact peel broke. He seemed to notice and added, "You don't have to work so hard. It's different." Actually, there's not much difference. But people always feel that doing things themselves is better than having others do them. One always cares more about those they love than others do. What's different? I looked at him and smiled, giving an unrelated answer. You're my husband. His stomach condition hadn't been completely cured, so after he was discharged from the hospital, I always thought about taking care of his stomach. Silas was a workaholic and often forgot to eat when he was busy. I would get up early in the morning to make breakfast for him. And sometimes when I had time, I would go to his office to bring him lunch. Occasionally, when I was busy, I would remind him at mealtimes. Before I knew it, 2 or 3 years had passed, and many things had become habits, like getting up early, Today, Silas got up earlier than usual. I didn't have time to fix his tie before he rushed out the door with his lunchbox. As he was leaving, he paused, turned around, and looked at me standing in the living room. His expressionless face softened slightly, like the first snow after a storm. "I'm leaving, Lynn. Be careful on the road." Just like countless mornings before, going to bring Silas lunch was just a last-minute decision. I didn't tell Silas, but the receptionist at his company recognized me and let me go up. I've been to Silas's company many times. He always introduced me to everyone with a smile, saying, "This is my wife." This title carried a touch of old-fashioned charm from the last century, yet it also evoked memories of the unwavering affection from that time. I even momentarily believed that we could continue like this for the rest of our lives. But life always loves to play tricks. It first grants you beautiful dreams, then shatters them. It leaves you in a mess, revealing its true, hideous face. Like now. I saw my husband talking to his long-lost love. In her hand was the lunchbox I had prepared for Silas. Tanya seemed unchanged, still looking like she did in college, with her long hair falling over her shoulders, smiling like a harmless yet mischievous cat. "Thank you, Mr. Silas. The breakfast was delicious." "No problem," Silas said, taking the lunch box. Tanya was about to say something else, but her gaze suddenly fell on me standing not far away. She looked surprised, her eyes curving like a crescent moon. "Lynn, it's been so long." She rushed toward me, reaching out to grab my hand, but paused when she noticed the lunchbox in my hand. "You came to bring Silas lunch? Did you also make his breakfast this morning?" "I'm sorry. I was feeling a bit low on blood sugar, so Silas told me to eat it. If I had known you made it for Silas, I wouldn't have eaten it." Tanya smiled awkwardly at me, but I still wanted to compliment her. "Lynn, you're such a good cook." "Of course I am. Silas has a sensitive stomach and is picky about food. I honed my cooking skills for him. He knows that." I smiled like her, but I hid my hand behind my back, my nails digging into my flesh. In that moment, besides anger, I suddenly felt so resentful. The plan for revenge began to take shape, bit by bit. Silas wouldn't cheat on me, even though I still felt panic at Tanya's appearance. I tried my best to play the role of a good wife. The chains of morality and responsibility would weigh on Silas. I didn't know who would break first, him or me. When he came back that night, he brought me a gift. The pink diamond sparkled brilliantly under the light, and the exquisite design clearly indicated its high value. It was beautiful, but I didn't like it. I rarely wore jewelry, only dressing up when accompanying Silas to formal dinners. Silas wasn't good with words, and I knew this gift was his way of apologizing and making amends for what had happened that morning. I still smiled and accepted it. Silas's expression softened slightly, but I didn't know if it was because I didn't hold it against him or because I wasn't angry with Tanya. I casually placed the box in the drawer, went to bed before him, but couldn't fall asleep. When he returned to the room and lay down beside me, the familiar scent of sandalwood enveloped me. The man carefully embraced me from behind. His warmth seeped through the thin fabric, and I closed my eyes, breathing evenly. Even after he fell asleep, I couldn't sleep at all. The discomfort in my upper abdomen grew stronger. I opened my eyes. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting a silvery glow on the floor. I stared at it for a long time. So long that the world seemed silent, as if I were the only person left. It seemed like I only realized it then, that I was about to die. In the morning, when I sent Silas out, my phone's calendar pushed a notification. I glanced at it hurriedly and remembered that today was the day I was supposed to visit my mother. My parents divorced when I was very young. He didn't love my mother and had been having an affair with someone else for years. Even having a daughter who was older than me. My mother raised me alone, struggling to make ends meet. So I vowed to study hard. But I had bad luck and became the target of a small group of bullies. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Perhaps it was just my clothes that they disliked. Or maybe it was something I said one day that made them hold a grudge against me. I dared not tell my mother. And the teachers couldn't control them. The more I resisted, the worse they became. On the day I was surrounded by a crowd, I had thoughts of self-destruction. The rough texture of the bricks in my bag calmed my nerves slightly. The leader of the girls looked down on me with contempt, about to announce her judgment. Then Silas appeared. He was smart and knew this wouldn't be the end of it. He deliberately protected me, stopping them from coming back for more. I managed to get through my 3 years of middle school safely. That's why I followed him without hesitation, got into the same university as him, and became a better person. But I was too late. Just as Silas was my light, he had also encountered his own light. Tanya. She was also my half-sister. I brought my mom some things. She now has a new family. I sat there for about 10 minutes, had a brief chat with her, and politely said goodbye. I took a taxi back and walked to the entrance of the Greenwood community. From a distance, I saw them again. Tanya and Silas were walking side by side, talking about something. I noticed my usually cold husband curve the corners of his lips, and the smile in his eyes was soft. I froze in place. As they laughed, a dirty little dog suddenly darted out from behind the grass and barked at Tanya twice. The two stopped, and Tanya reached out to pet it. But the dog growled and lunged at her legs, scaring her into Silas' arms. Silas helped her up, his hand briefly resting on her waist before quickly withdrawing. When I turned my head, I happened to see myself standing there. Tanya reacted faster than he did. Lynn. I walked over blankly. Before Tanya could say anything, I bent down first and picked up the dirty little dog from the ground. The puppy seemed scared too, burrowing into my arms but not struggling. Silas. I said, smiling at him. I want to keep it. The atmosphere grew tense. I just smiled and repeated, I want to keep it. Silas accompanied me to the animal hospital, where the dog was examined, and we discovered it had numerous health issues. Its bones were fractured. There were scratches on its abdomen, and countless other minor injuries. But it was well behaved, not making a sound during the examination, just lying quietly. Silas looked at me, hesitating to speak. He remained silent all the way home after the examination. The dog was admitted to the hospital, and I named it Nyen. When we got home, the atmosphere between us suddenly became tense. Silas didn't speak, and I remained silent as well, until both of us entered the bedroom. The warm orange light suddenly made the room feel cozy. I sat on the bed and saw Silas come in wearing his pajamas. The warm light fell on him, softening his sharp features. He didn't show his emotions, and occasionally I saw him smile, but it was only a slight curve of his lips, fleeting like a flower blooming in the sun, quickly disappearing. I didn't know how much Silas felt for me. Over the years, I had thought he might have some feelings for me, but these thoughts seemed ridiculous after Tanya returned. Silas. I suddenly called out to him. He raised his eyes to look at me, his expression innocent yet cold. Do you still mean what you said? What did I say? You said, I am your wife. You will always be good to me. I looked at him and smiled. Silas suddenly lowered his eyes. His voice faint. Why are you suddenly asking this? Nothing. I just remembered. A dull pain in my upper abdomen began to ache, and the pain in my waist intensified at night, my nerves twitching like a tight rope. I will. As he answered, the light in the room suddenly went out. The man's hot breath fell on my cheek, and he gently kissed me. "Good night, Lynn." The breathing of the person behind me gradually slowed down. I carefully wriggled out of his embrace and turned to face him. Then, under the moonlight, I traced his features inch by inch, from his brow to his chin. Silas wouldn't cheat on me, but he would always think of Tanya. I suddenly wanted to know, after I died, if Silas remembered this moment. How would he feel? On the day I left the hospital, I thought about so many things. But in the end, they all tangled up in my mind like a messy ball of yarn. The first thought that came to mind was, if I died, what would Silas do? He would have to remarry. At that time, I thought, Tanya was divorced, and he had lost his wife. The two of them could be together. That would be okay. But definitely not now. So, I changed my mind. The first time I met Tanya was on my 10th birthday. My mom rarely had a day off, so she took me out to a restaurant. The restaurant was very upscale, and the dishes were all quite expensive. But my mom only ordered a few items. A family of 3 was sitting not far from us, laughing and chatting happily, while my mom and I sat in silence. The little girl at that table was smiling constantly, wearing a beautiful princess dress and a crown that sparkled in the light. Her father was sitting across from her, taking photos of her non-stop. When her father stood up to go to the restroom, the familiar side of his face made the fork in my hand drop onto the table. My mother noticed my reaction, followed my gaze, and then looked back at me indifferently. "Should we go say hello?" she asked me calmly. "After all, he's your father." When her father returned to his seat, the little girl ran over to him with a smile, and he picked her up, lifting her high in the air. Both of their faces were beaming with joy. I shook my head. My memories of my father were vague because he had never been close to me. Occasionally, when I tried to act spoiled with him, he would scold me coldly. This fragmented image of my father had confused me for a long time. Later, I realized he simply didn't love me. All the things that seemed so out of reach to me were effortlessly within Tanya's grasp. I pretended to know nothing and continued to be kind to Silas, occasionally catching the scent of jasmine on his clothes. Sometimes I saw photos on Sunyan's social media that had a glimpse of Silas in them, subtle yet obvious. I lingered on each one for a long time before giving her a heart. But I never said anything. Just like before, maintaining a superficial peace. Yet there was an underlying sense of impending storm clouds gathering. The only difference was that I had quit my job. There was now Nyen at home, and I had picked up the habit of writing in my diary again. I wrote every day, recording the mundane details of my daily life and my physical condition. I started staying up all night, unable to sleep, with a dull pain in my abdomen. Every day, I cooked for Silas. But when it was time for me to eat, I stared at the food on the table for a long time, unable to bring myself to eat. When I went to see my mother, we chatted for only a few minutes as usual. As I was leaving, I slipped the bank card with the password written on it into a book on the table while she wasn't looking. Inside was most of my savings. This was the last time I would see her. She walked me to the front door, her gaze lingering on my face, and added, "Take care of yourself." "Thank you. You too. My mother will be fine." She didn't love my father, nor did she love me, but she still fulfilled her duty as a mother and raised me to be healthy. Later, it was probably karma, my father went bankrupt. But my mother's luck turned around. She married the man she loved, had a younger brother, and the 3 of them lived happily together. Silas came home early one evening. I had just finished cooking when he arrived. The dishes were steaming on the table. We hadn't eaten together like this in a long time. Since Tanya returned, he had become increasingly busy. Silas was well-mannered, eating in silence and speaking only when necessary. Back then, I thought that just sitting there together in silence was beautiful. Silas slowly picked at his food, and I ate a couple of bites before losing my appetite. My stomach started to ache again. Just then, Nien came downstairs and darted under the table. I put down my bowl and chopsticks. Silas looked at me, and I explained, "I'm going to get some dog food for Nien." Nien's room was on the second floor, which I had converted from a storage room into a cozy space for him. The bowl of dog food was empty, so I added a little more. Nien wagged his tail and ate eagerly. Watching him, my mood improved slightly. Suddenly, the pain in my abdomen intensified, and a metallic taste rose in my throat. I covered my mouth with my hand, and when I removed it, the bright red blood stung my eyes. Nien suddenly stopped eating, turned its head, and rushed to my feet, barking at me. I tore off a piece of paper to wipe the blood away, then crumpled it into a ball and threw it into the trash can. I knelt down, gave its dog head a firm rub, and whispered, "I'm okay." It barked twice more, then stopped eating and rushed toward me. I picked it up, and it stopped barking, rubbing against me. Someone knocked on the door frame. Silas stood in the doorway, looking at us, and said gently, "Let's eat first, Lynn." I really had no appetite, but I forced myself to finish eating. Silas went to the kitchen to wash the dishes. When he came out, he saw me on the sofa holding Nien and playing with him, so he sat down beside me. "Lynn, I've been busy lately, but once I have some free time, I'll take you to Capri Island. How about that?" I rubbed Nien's ear and replied, "Okay." Going on a vacation to Capri Island with Silas had always been on my wish list. Back then, we were still strangers to each other. After we got married, we didn't go on a honeymoon. We just went about our daily lives, working and coming home. Later, as our relationship improved, I started thinking about taking Silas to Capri Island as a belated honeymoon. I didn't tell Silas about this little plan of mine, but I mentioned it to him a few times. However, his work schedule was too busy, and we had to postpone it again and again. Now, he's the one bringing it up. I caught him glancing at me, his eyes slightly curved. I pretended not to notice. He spoke again, "There's a dinner party next Wednesday. Are you free that day? Would you like to go with me?" I hesitated for a moment before quickly regaining my composure. "I won't go." Silas didn't ask any further, just nodded. My gaze remained fixed on Nien, no longer paying attention to Silas. Tanya had just returned to the country and had a small circle of friends. She wouldn't miss such a good opportunity. If she asked Silas, he wouldn't ignore her. Nien, who was lying on my lap, hummed twice, and I stroked its head. Silas probably didn't expect me to show up at the dinner party he was taking Tanya to behind my back. But I came anyway. The banquet hall was bathed in dazzling lights, with men in suits and women in elegant gowns moving gracefully through the room, clinking glasses, and enjoying themselves. I stood at the edge, feeling out of place, like an intruder. Silas was easy to spot. I had been chasing him for over a decade, searching for his figure in the crowd countless times. He was wearing a well-tailored suit, tall and slender. The woman by his side, holding his hand, was wearing a red dress, as vibrant as a rose. It was Tanya. Watching them move through the crowd, laughing and joking, they looked like a perfect match, made for each other. Even though I had expected the scene, seeing it with my own eyes felt like being slapped hard across the face. My heart raced wildly, and a sense of unease wrapped around me like a tight rope, squeezing harder and harder until it felt like it would explode. The threads in my mind tangled into a chaotic mess, and the veins on my temples pulsed rhythmically. But I did nothing. just stood there, watching them hold hands and smile as they greeted everyone. I saw someone walk towards Silas, pat his shoulder, and point in my direction. Silas turned his head to look at me. I wasn't wearing a beautiful dress, and I was already very thin. I hadn't dared to look in the mirror for a long time, afraid of seeing my increasingly prominent cheekbones and the faintly skeletal features of my face. I knew he had seen me, because his expression changed instantly, looking terrible. Through the crowd, we just stared at each other from afar. I just stood there, watching him, neither smiling nor crying. Seeing his expression change, he broke free from Tanya's hand and tried to come over to me. But through the crowd, his steps seemed laborious. But I suddenly smiled at him, then turned around and left the place. When I got home, I rushed straight to my old room. The tangled threads in my mind were intertwined, impossible to untangle. The vines around my heart tightened even more, as if they were about to burst open at any moment. I could no longer stay calm. Everything on the desk was swept to the ground, crashing loudly. It wasn't enough. The books on the shelf were torn apart by me, and the scattered pieces of paper fell to the ground like an untimely snow. It wasn't enough. The small ornaments on the shelf, cosmetics, skincare products, the exquisite handicrafts Silas had brought me on his business trip, and the building blocks we had assembled together. Destructive desire and cruelty intertwined, and emotional impulses ran rampant in my mind. The floor was a mess. Chaotic. Just like my broken life. When I came to my senses, the scissors were already pressed against my arm. Nian was frantically barking at my legs. The dog's bark was sharp and urgent. When it saw me looking down at it, it suddenly fell silent, opened its mouth, and gave a silly smile. The scissors fell to the ground, and Nian rushed toward me, barking as it came. I mechanically picked it up and held it close, and it rubbed its fluffy head against me, its tiny body warm. Holding it, I suddenly started crying. All the impulses faded away. Destruction didn't bring me satisfaction, it only left a bottomless black hole in my heart. Such torment. When Silas came home, I had already tidied up the room. He wanted to talk to me, but I sat on the sofa and smiled at him. I knew he wanted to explain, but didn't know how to start. I had been with him for 4 years. We had navigated the world of fame and fortune together. Silas was not good with words, but he was logical, and everything he said came out cold and icy. It was me who taught him, bit by bit, how to navigate the world and deal with those seasoned veterans. Now he moves effortlessly in such circles, but outside of them, he remains as reserved as ever. Back then, I loved him no matter what he was like. Now I realize it was probably just because we had nothing to say to each other. I smiled and spoke, cutting off all his words. It's okay. I know Tanya just returned from abroad and doesn't have any connections. If you want to help her, take her to the dinner party. Silas's expression changed. It's okay. I looked at him, my voice gentle. I don't mind. Silas looked at me without speaking. Our eyes locked. I continued to gaze at him tenderly. After a long while, he finally looked away. But he suddenly hugged me tightly, as if trying to embed me into his body, making it hard for me to breathe. His warm breath brushed against my ear. Lynn. Intimate and close. You've lost weight. I smiled but didn't respond. The scent of sandalwood mixed with jasmine filled the air, and I forced myself to suppress the urge to vomit. The next morning, I took him to work as usual. I thought he was leaving, but Silas suddenly stopped in the living room. Lynn, he said softly. I forgot to tie my tie. I felt a bit helpless. Went upstairs, grabbed one, and handed it to him. Silas didn't take it. Lowering his head, help me. Lynn. I did as he asked and helped him tie it. Silas kept his head down, obediently waiting for me to finish. Done. Suddenly, my waist was gripped, pulling me forward until our bodies were pressed together. I looked up at him, Song. All the words were choked back, leaving only a warm sensation on my lips. Silas gripped my waist and kissed me fiercely. He was like a beast tearing through defenses, driven by a fierce desire. When we parted, the corners of his eyes were tinged with a faint red. I looked at him, saying nothing. Silas placed another kiss on my forehead, his lips curving slightly. I'm leaving, Lynn. I smiled and bid him farewell. I had made plans with Tanya. The time was set for 10 o'clock in the morning. I arrived on time and waited for her for half an hour at the coffee shop before she finally showed up. Tanya was beautiful. Before my father went bankrupt, she had lived a life of luxury. Later, my father went bankrupt, but she was still lucky enough to marry abroad. Now she's divorced and back in the country, with Silas helping her out in every way. How fortunate. Tanya sat down across from me, her makeup flawless and her smile sweet. As for me, I had dark circles under my eyes, looked gaunt, and had a terrible complexion. Lynn. Why did you suddenly ask me out? Our connection wasn't particularly deep, we were at most alumni from the same school. I didn't know how she could be so casual with me. I didn't touch the fruit tea on the table, the icy sensation brought me back to my senses. You've already ordered, Tanya said, glancing at the table before smiling and calling the waiter over for an iced Americano. She leaned her chin on her hand and smiled at me. You're Mr. Silas also loves iced Americano. I used to hate it, but lately I've grown to like it. I took a sip of the fruit tea without responding. Tanya's smile was innocent and guileless. She was the one who told me she had divorced and returned to the country. After not seeing her for many years, she suddenly added me on WeChat. Her tone was polite, but she couldn't hide her triumph. It was as if she couldn't wait to tell me. I'm back to steal your husband. After the aroma of the fruit tea dissipated, only a bitter taste remained in my mouth. Tanya's iced Americano hadn't arrived yet, and her gaze was fixed on me. When she saw me look up at her, the smile on her lips deepened. Speaking of which, I should thank your family. A sudden, loud voice echoed through the hall. A few guests sitting nearby craned their necks to look our way. Tanya turned her face away, her fair cheeks flushing red. It was as if she had been struck by a sudden slap. She covered her face and turned to look at me. Nyen. I didn't want to hear her call my name. One slap wasn't enough to vent my anger. I picked up the fruit tea on the table and poured it over her head. The dark liquid trickled down her hair, dripping onto the table and staining her white shirt. The lemon, peach, and fruit pieces at the bottom of the cup stuck to her hair, clothes, and bag. Her makeup wasn't waterproof. Her eyeshadow smudged. She looked ridiculous and laughable. She froze for a moment. In the cafe, countless pairs of eyes were fixed on us, watching our every move. Her eyes suddenly welled up with tears, and she looked pitiful. Lynn, what are you doing? Tanya. I coldly interrupted her act. You know exactly what you're doing. Don't play these games in front of me. Tears glistened in her eyes, threatening to fall. You came back for Silas. You know Silas will treat you well, and you want to take him away from me, right? I watched her calmly, my voice steady. Her face paled for a moment before she regained her composure. She pulled a wet wipe from her bag and slowly wiped the dirt from her face. Yes. Tanya looked at me, slowly curling her lips into a determined smile. Her voice lowered. Lynn, matters of the heart can't be forced. We've already exposed our true feelings. I looked at her and suddenly smiled. You're right. Tanya, do you want to make a bet with me? If you win, he's yours. I'll gladly step aside. And you won't have to deal with the hassle of being the other woman. Tanya looked at me quietly and smiled sweetly. All right. When Silas came back, I was in my room writing in my diary. I heard him open the door, put down my pen, and stuffed the diary into the drawer. Silas had been coming home early lately. Sometimes he even accompanied me to go out at night. One evening, I was sitting on the bed reading a book when he suddenly came over and pulled me into his arms. I leaned against him, feeling the slightly higher temperature of another person's body. He rested his chin on my head and read the cheesy romance novel in his hands alongside me. When we read the part where the male lead stood up for the female supporting character, and she slapped the female lead, who cried out, "I'm your wife," he tightened his arms around my waist. I turned the page as if nothing had happened. We continued reading, watching the male lead repeatedly help the female supporting character oppress the female lead, who was heartbroken time and time again, until she finally made up her mind to leave him. The male lead suddenly repents, immediately starts chasing after his wife, and after some twists and turns, the two have a happy ending. The book was finished by midnight. I remembered the sleeping pills I had left in another room. I struggled to break free from Silas' embrace, but he didn't let go, holding me tightly in his arms. "Silas?" I called out to him. He replied softly. The room suddenly became very quiet. Quiet enough that I could hear his heartbeat. "Lynn." He buried his head in my shoulder, hinting at a touch of grievance. "You never called me by my full name before." I suddenly felt like laughing. Silas never called me Lynn either. He would just address me politely as Miss Sin with a distant and unfamiliar tone. It turns out we've both changed. I rolled over, turned my face toward him, wrapped my arms around his waist, and smiled as I called him. "See." He looked at me, his eyes carefully studying every emotion on my face. Finally, he lowered his gaze and pulled us closer together. "Lynn." I never knew Silas could be so deeply affectionate. But if he truly loves me, then why does he care so much about Tanya? It had been a week since I had arranged to meet Tanya. As our wedding anniversary approached, Silas became even more clingy. On the 100th day of my diary, it was also our wedding anniversary. A casual remark I had made earlier was remembered by Silas, who had returned home early and spent the afternoon preparing in the kitchen. I took Nyan out for a walk and returned home to find the house already decorated. The aroma of the food on the table was tempting. Silas stood beside me, a smile on his lips, his eyes soft as he looked at me. "Lynn, welcome home." Roses and music, cliché but romantic. Under the champagne were 2 plane tickets. The date set for the day after tomorrow. I looked at Silas, then at the tickets, and smiled. The clock on the wall read 8 o'clock. The atmosphere was perfect. Until Tanya's call came in. The beauty cried with tears streaming down her face, saying she felt so miserable. She shouted out the intimate nickname that had once belonged to them. "Xiao Sui. I really feel so miserable. I'm here, and I don't know anyone. Come help me, please." Xiao Sui. The romantic atmosphere came to an abrupt halt. Silas glanced at me. Just that one glance. I understood. "Lynn. I'm sorry. I'll take her to the hospital and come back soon." I only asked him one question. "Can you not go?" Silas looked at me but didn't say a word. The atmosphere dropped to freezing point. I saw the smile fade from his lips, and he turned back into the Silas from 4 years ago. Cold and indifferent. The Silas who was still a stranger to me. He looked away and assured me again, "I'll be right back. I won't miss our wedding anniversary." We seemed to be at an impasse. Finally, I relented. I said, "All right." Silas turned toward the door, and I stood in the living room watching his back. He turned around, I smiled. Like countless times before. Like a dutiful wife toward her husband. I said, "Be careful on the road." He replied, "All right." I watched him disappear into the night, the music still playing from the speakers. I threw it on the floor with a loud crash, and the living room fell silent. I turned and went back to my room. Silas wouldn't be coming back today. I knew it. Tanya had won. But I hadn't lost either. I returned to my room, locked the door, and took out my diary from the drawer. I flipped to the latest page. On the last page, as I put pen to paper, I suddenly felt it was very difficult. All the thoughts in my mind scattered again, like unbreakable code. My abdomen, head, and heart felt as though they had been sliced open with a knife. I suddenly felt very cold, as though the chill was coming from my bones. My hand holding the pen trembled slightly, but I still wrote each word carefully. August 25th, 2022. Today is our wedding anniversary. Silas cooked for me and decorated the house. He also planned to take me to Capri Island. The ceremony hadn't started yet when Tanya called. Silas went to find Tanya. He left me behind. I can't go to Capri Island anymore. Goodbye, Silas. Tears fell, spreading into a stain on the paper. But I didn't feel the slightest bit of sadness. The tears that fell were brought on by pain. I lived for love. Other people's love and my own love. Because no one loved me. I lived only for Silas' love. I used to love Silas so much. After all that sincerity was consumed, I was left with nothing but an empty shell. Like a candle that has burned to the end. I won't live long. The last bit of love I had for Silas has also vanished today. As I put down the last word, I sat at the table and laughed heartily, laughing freely. My part in this play has come to an end today. Why did I hide it from Silas? Why did I pretend not to see their affair? Why did I give Tanya a chance? What I gave Tanya was not a vine climbing up a tree, but a sharp and pointed knife. The living cannot compete with the dead. It doesn't matter if Silas doesn't love me, but he will never forget me for the rest of his life. He feels guilty toward me. I will make him feel guilty. Make him regret it. I will make him read this diary. Make him relive my feelings over and over again. Make him spend the rest of his life reminiscing about how, as his wife was dying of a terminal illness, he slowly pushed her into an even more desperate abyss. This absurd play is driven to its climax by my death. Next, it's Silas and Tanya's turn. The hard sleeping pills were stuck in my throat, making it hard to breathe. I forced them all down with swallowing motions. On the table lay not only my diary but also the meticulously prepared recipes I had crafted for him. His stomach was sensitive, and he was a picky eater. Over the past 4 years, I had carefully tailored these recipes to his taste. It was my gift to him. I lay quietly in bed, my hands folded, waiting for death to come. The room was silent. Until a dog barked outside the door. Something heavy kept hitting the door, making a dull sound. I stared at the ceiling, ignoring everything. Nien was still barking. Sleep began to overtake my mind, and my consciousness gradually faded. Silas suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of panic, as if he were about to lose the most important thing in his life. It was like that day in the banquet hall, when he saw Lynette standing in the distance, pale and gaunt, as if she were about to leave him at any moment. Only one thought echoed in his mind: grab her. Don't let her go. But she left anyway, overwhelmed by panic. He even forgot why he had come to the banquet. After staying there absent-mindedly for over an hour, he hurried home. He thought Lynette would be angry, jealous, and confront him angrily about why he had done that. But she didn't. She just sat on the sofa and smiled at him, then used a voice that could only be described as gentle to break the awkward silence. His feelings of uncertainty and anxiety were not soothed, but instead grew even stronger. "It's okay." Silas comforted himself. Lynette loved him. He had always known that Lynette loved him, because she had always been straightforward, passionate, and sincere. He knew Lynette would tolerate him and forgive him. So when Tanya called, her voice trembling with tears as she called him by that familiar name, he agreed. Lynette would understand him. He took Tanya to the hospital, got her hooked up to N4, and was about to leave when she suddenly grabbed his sleeve. Tanya's eyes were still wet with tears, and she said with red eyes, "Xiao Sui, stay here with me, okay?" Silas wanted to refuse. He had promised Lynette he wouldn't miss their wedding anniversary. But Tanya was just standing there, tears in her eyes, her body thin and trembling. It was already nighttime. He softened his heart. When Silas returned, it was already the next morning. The living room light was still on, casting a warm glow in the dimly lit sky. Silas quickened his pace, wanting to get back to Lynette as soon as possible. He had broken his promise. But Lynette wasn't in the bedroom. She wasn't in the study either. Nor was she in the room she had once lived in alone. She was nowhere to be found. The food on the dining table had gone cold, untouched. In the corner of the living room lay the remains of a stereo, which had been thrown to the ground with force. The only things missing from the house were a few of her clothes and yen. Lynette was angry. Silas thought she had just gone on a trip out of spite. It didn't matter. She would come back once she had calmed down. He would apologize to her when she returned in a few days and explain the situation. But after waiting for several days, Lynette still hadn't come back. No one knew where she had gone. Lynette's phone was turned off. Her colleagues said she had quit her job 3 months ago, and her mother said she hadn't seen her in a month. "Please let her know that she can take back her bank card when she has time. I don't need her money, she can keep it." The middle-aged woman's tone was polite yet distant. Silas seemed to sense something was wrong. Panic resurfaced, even more intense than before, like a wave that had briefly receded before crashing back in. Silas began investigating Lynette's whereabouts, checking her social media activity over the past few days and reviewing the dashcam footage. Lynette's life over the past few days seemed straightforward. She would go out in the morning, buy groceries, return home for lunch, and then take Nien out to play in the afternoon. This routine repeated day after day. Only sometimes would she drive to the hospital. Silas wasn't stupid. Putting all the pieces together, the answer was obvious. When he woke up suddenly at night, he saw her leaning against the headboard, staring out the window, not sleeping at all. He held her increasingly thin body in his arms, and noticed the increasingly silent atmosphere at the dinner table and her furrowed brow. Silas didn't believe it, because she hadn't said anything to him. But he couldn't help but believe it, because she hadn't said a word to him. Silas searched for her for a long time, but Lynette was like she had vanished into thin air. Nowhere to be found. A month and a half later, a stranger's call came through. They told him that Lynette had passed away. Lynette had died at a rehabilitation center on Capri Island. When Silas rushed there, her ashes had already been scattered into the sea. The person who greeted him was Lynette's caregiver, a young woman who treated him coldly. In the room where Lynette had stayed, she handed him 3 notebooks. These were Miss Sin's diary and some other records. The woman paused for a moment before adding, "Lynette asked me to burn these, but I thought Mr. Song should see them." As she left, she glanced at Silas once more, her eyes betraying an icy coldness she couldn't hide. Silas sat quietly in the room all afternoon. The afternoon sun filtered through the window panes, warming the room, but he felt a suffocating pressure, as if someone were choking him. He sat there until midnight. He opened Lynette's diary. The details he had deliberately ignored, the blood and tears hidden in the shadows. All the pain she had swallowed alone, thread by thread, wove into a sharp net that tore his heart to pieces. May 17th, 2022. The doctor said I have pancreatic cancer. He looked at me with a hint of pity. Actually, I didn't hear much of what he said. It was just that it was incurable. The doctor told me to be admitted to the hospital for treatment as soon as possible. I didn't want to. I didn't like hospitals, the cold walls, the smell of disinfectant everywhere, and the oppressive atmosphere. There was no one to accompany me. I wanted to call C, but I didn't know how to start. What could I say? Should I tell him I was dying? No. I wouldn't say it. But C called and said he had something to do tonight and would be back late. I suddenly remembered that Tanya was coming back today. C. Did you go pick her up? May 18th, 2022. I went to the company to bring C lunch. I ran into Tanya. She was still as beautiful as ever. She ate the lunch I made for C this morning. I was very angry. But then I thought about it and realized that what I gave to C was his. He can do whatever he wants with it. May 21st, 2022. I went to see my mother. She is doing well. I wanted to tell her, but then I thought it wasn't necessary. My mother is very happy now, and I shouldn't disturb her. On my way back, I ran into C and Tanya. There was also a little dog. I want to adopt it. The moment I said it, I saw C's expression change. But I still want to keep it. The vet at the pet hospital asked me what to name it. Let's call it Nyen. Nyen. Lin. May 22nd, 2022. Last night before bed, I asked C if he still meant what he said. He said he did. If only I had been a little dumber. Then I wouldn't have noticed his evasiveness. C. Those who betray true feelings will swallow 1,000 silver needles. May 25th, 2022. I saw C on my WeChat moments. He appeared in a photo posted by Tanya. It was a dinner party for young elites, and half of his face was visible in the lower left corner. Her caption read, "It's so nice to have a big shot in the business world as a friend." I thought it was nice too. So I gave her a like. May 28th, 2022. Nyen had been home for a few days, and the dog supplies I bought online had arrived. I went to the post office to check, and the owner had packed them all together, which was a bit much. When Silas came back, I asked him to help me carry Nyen's package. He said okay and then turned around and went to the study. He'll remember, right? June 1st, 2022. Children's Day. I took Nyen out to play for the whole day. On the way back, we passed by the parcel station, and I thought about it and decided to go in and pick up the package. The staff at the parcel station was very nice and offered to help me load it into the car. Nyen's room is on the second floor. I didn't wait for Silas to come back. June 7th, 2022. My sleep quality is really bad, and I can't fall asleep easily. During the day, I took Nyen out to play and passed by a cake shop. I remembered that I hadn't had any desserts in a long time, so I bought a box of tiramisu. But when I brought it home, I suddenly lost my appetite. I used to love it so much, but now, looking at the sticky cream, I only felt nauseous. June 19th, 2022. Silas seems to be getting busier and busier, always telling me not to wait for him at night. After he faded out of my life, he frequently appeared in Tanya's social media feed. I occasionally envy Tanya. When she was young, her father loved her. When she grew up, her husband loved her. After her divorce, my husband also loved her. But I seem to have nothing. June 25th, 2022. I couldn't sleep at all. The entire night was spent awake. with the pain growing more intense. Standing hurts. Sitting hurts. Lying down hurts. It hurts so much. The person in the mirror looks absolutely terrible. My complexion is starting to look waxy and yellow. June 30th, 2022. Silas came home for dinner. Actually, I haven't eaten properly in a long time. I forced myself to take a bite, but it came right back up. So I just ate a little. I made an excuse to go feed Nian. Then, I coughed up blood. I've only seen it on TV, where the female lead, terminally ill, coughs up a mouthful of blood, clutching her chest like she's sure. Delicate and tragic. I didn't get the female lead's treatment, but I did get her illness. It's not a big deal, just coughing up some blood. Compared to the pain and insomnia, vomiting blood seemed insignificant. July 5th, 2022. Silas asked me if I wanted to go to the dinner party, but I said no. I hadn't looked in the mirror for a long time. I couldn't sleep well at night and couldn't eat anything. When I brushed my teeth in the morning, I accidentally looked up and saw a stranger in the mirror. My cheeks were sunken, my cheekbones slightly protruding, dark circles under my eyes, and my lips pale. It felt like I had aged suddenly. But I'm only in my 20s. The prime of my life. It will only get worse as time goes on. Weakness. Jaundice. Abdominal pain. Nervous exhaustion, like a festering wound on the bone. Always by my side. Tormenting me until death. I don't want to die looking so terrible. July 11th, 2022. I broke my promise and went to the banquet after all. Silas and Tanya looked so well suited for each other. If I hadn't been losing my mind, that thought wouldn't have crossed my mind the moment I saw them. Later, Silas noticed me. He was coming over to find me, but I ran away. I realized I couldn't control my emotions anymore. If Nian hadn't been there, I don't know what I would have done. July 18th, 2022. Abdominal pain. Insomnia. I threw up after eating. July 22nd, 2022. The scissors in my room were stained with blood. When I came to my senses, I realized I had cut my arm. I bandaged it quickly. This isn't the first time. I plan to go to the hospital tomorrow to get some sleeping pills. July 26th, 2022. Abdominal pain. Vomiting blood. The pain gets worse after eating. I don't want to eat anymore. July 30th, 2022. I was lying in bed and almost passed out from the pain. When I came to, I saw Nian licking my hand by the bed. I reached out and stroked its head. I picked up my phone to check my social media. The first post I saw was Tanya at the beach. The grid of photos was beautiful. In the last one, I saw Silas's hand. Our wedding ring was still on it. August 1st, 2022. Pain. August 5th, 2022. I went to the hospital and got painkillers. August 15th, 2022. I saw Tanya. She was so beautiful. I hadn't looked in the mirror for a long time. I knew I had become ugly. August 20th, 2022. The sleeping pills seemed to be losing their effect. The doctor advised me to be hospitalized. He said it would become more painful as time went on. I refused. I never planned to live to the end anyway. August 25th, 2022. The original words were crossed out with black lines. 2 new sentences were added. Lynette died on this day. But Nian saved her. August 25th, 2022. I was supposed to die on this day. But Nian wouldn't let me. It kept calling. Calling. So loudly. It was so loud I couldn't sleep. It was so loud it made me anxious. It was so loud I couldn't take it anymore. With my last bit of consciousness, I dialed 120. A few hours later, I woke up with N4 in my arm. A nurse was standing by the bed. "Where's Nyen?" She paused for a moment. "Nyen is." I leaned on the bed rail, trying to sit up, but my body wouldn't obey me. The nurse helped me up. "I want to go home." "Your body is still weak, you can't." "I want to go home." I lowered my eyes. I repeated stubbornly and unreasonably. "Nyen isn't here. I have to find Nyen." When I got home, it was already midnight. There was a message from Silas on my phone. I didn't look at it and blocked him directly. As soon as the door opened, the little white dog immediately jumped into my arms. Nyen kept barking in my arms, rubbing against me and licking me. I held it, and tears suddenly fell. All the suppressed emotions erupted like a flood, and I sat on the cold living room floor holding it and cried for a long time. I cried until my eyes were swollen. Finally, I buried my face in it and said in a voice only the two of us could hear, "Nyen, let's go. I want to go to a place where no one knows us. Just me and Nyen. And love." The Nyen in my arms didn't know if it understood my words. It just looked at me with its eyes, then slowly and carefully licked away all the tears on my face. No one in the world loves me, but a dog does. A dog will always love the person who brought it home. Nyen will always love Lynette. I rushed to Capri Island that night and stayed at the Santa Monica Rehabilitation Center. Life on Capri Island was as beautiful as I had imagined. During the day, I played with Nyen on the beach and chatted with the townspeople. At night, I took walks by the sea. I love the sea. The endless waves and the salty sea breeze. Just looking at the sea makes my heart calm for no reason. I hired a caregiver, a young, beautiful, and capable girl. After helping out for a few days, I told her that things might get tougher later. She saw me coughing up blood and asked what was wrong. "Pancreatic cancer." I casually tossed the blood-stained tissue aside and replied. Zhao Mian's eyes welled up with tears. I panicked, unsure how to comfort her. The young woman looked at me, and tears fell from her eyes. "Lin, you're only in your 20s. Her tears fell onto my hand, burning it. "Why did you get this disease?" Women are more empathetic toward other women. Even though we had only known each other for a short time, and even though she didn't really know much about my life, the sadness and grief she felt for me were so genuine. I wasn't actually sad, because I was used to it. But when she held my hand carefully and asked me, choking back tears, "Does it hurt a lot?" I still cried. The pain had already tortured me beyond recognition. From the moment I opened my eyes, the pain woke up with me. Then it followed me everywhere. I couldn't eat. All the delicious foods I once loved now taste like wax. I dare not eat. Because eating makes the pain worse. The suffering is not just physical. Insomnia has led to nervous exhaustion. And with no one to confide in, I can only chew on this pain day after day. The only one by my side is Nyen. The little dog cannot speak. It just circles around me when I'm in pain, whining anxiously. When I hold it, it stops barking. It just quietly licks my hand. It hurts so much. I tell her. These words sound like a complaint, yet also like a plea. They should be said to someone who loves you. But I have no one to say them to. I can't tell my father, because his only daughter is Tanya. I can't tell my mother, because she is already someone else's mother. I couldn't tell Silas either, because he was planning Tanya's future. In the end, I told someone I didn't know very well. I didn't go back to the hospital for treatment. Treatment was just prolonging my suffering, dragging out the painful days. I survived on painkillers and sleeping pills. Day by day, I grew thinner. Occasionally, when I looked in the mirror, the person inside had sallow skin and a gaunt face. completely unrecognizable as a young woman in her 20s. How ugly. I thought. Life is like a flower that withers quickly. I began to struggle to walk. Zhao Mian pushed me out every day to soak up the sun, watching Nian play on the lawn. Occasionally, I asked her to push me to the beach to take a walk and feel the sea breeze. Nian didn't mind how ugly I was and always wanted to kiss me. But I didn't let her. Zhao Mian didn't ask me about my condition anymore. Just chatted with me about my past. Her past. Gossip. Anything and everything. One day, she was tidying up and saw my wedding ring tucked away in a drawer. She gasped and asked me, "Lin, you got married?" "Yes." "Then your husband." She stopped mid-sentence, as if she had noticed something. I just smiled. He doesn't know. He doesn't know I'm sick. He doesn't know I came here secretly. "Did you two get divorced?" Zhao Mian blurted it out before immediately covering her mouth. "No." "Then why?" I smiled and didn't answer her. Changing the subject. Life on Capri Island passed quickly. Happy times are always short-lived. I couldn't hold on anymore. The painkillers had stopped working. The pain had reached an unbearable level. And I couldn't eat anything. I hid a knife in my room. Sometimes I would hold it against my wrist. But then I would look at Nian sleeping soundly in the room. I would put it down again. Living had become a form of torture for me. I rarely went out anymore. But lying down hurt too. Zhao Mian came to chat with me, telling me the latest gossip from town. Her neighbor's daughter was breaking up with her boyfriend, and they argued every night. Later, the girl cut her wrists at home in a suicide attempt, forcing her boyfriend not to break up with her. She was being unreasonable and hysterical. There was a big commotion at the hospital. Zhao Mian sighed. The scene was terrifying. How could someone risk their life to save a love? Because she once loved too deeply. It turned into an obsession. That's why she couldn't let go and became hysterical. I looked at her and smiled. I used to be like her. Because I've never been loved in this life. I've always longed for love. Zhao Mian looked stunned. I never would have guessed Lin was so gentle. Because I have Nian. Go talk to her more. Mian. Eventually she'll come to terms with it. She still has a chance to cut her losses and start over. But I don't. I really can't take it anymore. I asked Zhao Mian to push me out for a walk. The beach was already empty in the evening. We walked slowly, stopping here and there. The road was quiet. Nian didn't make a sound. When Zhao Mian pushed me back to the room, Nian followed us in. I hadn't let it into the room for several days. It ran to my bedside, trying to jump up and rub against me. I asked Zhao Mian to pick it up. It refused to let her, dodging left and right, then growling at her with bared teeth, looking very fierce. "Nian." I called out to it. It calmed down again, looking at me with an expression of unjustified grievance. I glanced at Zhao Mian. She picked it up and took it away. It barked a few more times outside the door. The sound grew fainter. I recalled the first time I saw it. It was dirty and filthy. It was skinny and looked very pitiful. Later, the doctor said it was riddled with health issues and had been abused by someone. I wish I had met it sooner. The pain was so intense that my consciousness began to fade. I hope that in my next life, I can bring Nian home sooner. Let it be a happy, healthy little dog. No more hunger or cold. No more abuse. And I can love myself sooner. Story Epilogue. When Zhao Mian opened the door, a tall, slender figure was standing outside the courtyard. It was Lin's husband. She didn't know when he had arrived. He was covered in frost. And when he saw her, he gave a stiff smile, like a wind-up puppet. "Miss Zhao, could you please take me to the place she often goes?" Zhao Mian didn't say anything. She didn't like this man. Lin had always been very secretive about her marriage, so Zhao Mian could only ask about her feelings indirectly. She was naturally curious. One day, while helping Lin sort through her room, she accidentally knocked over a book on the desk. A notebook fell out and opened. She admitted she was curious and glanced at the contents while bending down to pick it up. The diary she had knocked over. It was Lynette's secret love diary. Silas's name filled most of the pages. In her 20s, when imagination runs wild, she pieced together a heartbreaking story of a long-held crush that ended in Lynette marrying someone else. Until the man who came to handle Lynette's belongings appeared, wearing the same wedding ring as Lynette. When he signed his name, the word Silas caught her eye. She felt a sudden wave of confusion. If Lynette had married the man she had loved for so long, why did she come here alone to wait for death? What was it that made her die without ever seeing the man she once loved again? She couldn't understand. But she instinctively hated this man. She refused him. But on the 5th day, when she opened the door in the morning and saw him standing in the yard, Zhao Mian relented. Silas followed Zhao Mian to the places Lynette often went. A park always crowded with people. A corner cafe. A stretch of Sunset Boulevard. And a beach. The park was where she took Nian to play with other dogs. The cafe was where she often sat for hours. Sunset Boulevard was near the Santa Monica Rehabilitation Center, when she didn't need a wheelchair. She could walk further. The beach was where she spent the most time. She was there with Nian. When they were tired, the two of them would snuggle together and look out at the sea. They were as quiet as two sculptures. Silas walked back and forth, imagining over and over again. 5 days later, he knocked on Zhao Mian's door again. An inexplicable timidity came over him, and he hesitated to speak. "Miss Zhao, can I talk to you about Lin?" The person in front of him suddenly changed expression, her arm trembling as she gripped the doorknob. After a long pause, he heard her say, "No." The girl who had always been cold toward him grew emotional, her eyes reddening. "What does Mr. Song want to hear?" Hear how she struggled with her illness. Hear how she died alone, with only a dog by her side. Or hear how she died in agony, her body ravaged by cancer until she was unrecognizable? Lynette never cried out in pain. But Zhao Mian could see the veins bulging on her forehead and the cold sweat on her forehead. When she died, Zhao Mian didn't cry. When her ashes were scattered into the sea, Zhao Mian didn't cry. When she sent Nian away and heard that it wasn't eating or drinking at someone else's house, just curled up in a tiny ball, Zhao Mian didn't cry. But to be with someone, watching her life being ravaged by illness, watching her wither away bit by bit, watching her in so much pain yet still gentle and peaceful, watching a living person turn into ashes held in her hands. How could she not feel heartbroken? She was in the prime of her life. Yet everything was irreversible. Zhao Mian's tears fell in large drops. She cried uncontrollably, then raised her hand to wipe away her tears. Her eyes red, her voice cold. "So, Mr. Song, when she was sick and in pain, where were you? Where was he?" Silas thought. He was with Tanya. Silas had been on the island for half a month. He found Nian's current home. He went there several times, trying to take Nian back from that man. The man who had taken Nian was a man with a fierce appearance. He was brutal and unreasonable. No matter how high the price was offered, the man ignored him, even brandishing a broom several times to try to drive him out. He refused to give up, continuing to persist, being driven out each day only to return the next. After 7 or 8 days, the man couldn't take it anymore. He stood at the door and scolded him, then asked, "What's wrong with you? Why do you want this little mutt?" Silas stood there silently, like a schoolchild, enduring the scolding. When he heard the question, he paused for a moment, The air fell silent for a moment. The man didn't want to deal with him and was about to go back inside when he suddenly heard him say, "It's my late wife's keepsake." The burly man turned around, looked at him for a moment, then walked back inside without looking back. Silas stood silently at the door. After a moment, he came out again, holding the little white dog. The man handed Nyen to him. "Take good care of it. Otherwise, if I see her again, she'll blame you." Nyen wasn't close to him. Silas took it home. Its bed and toys were still in the old house. But Nyen stayed in the room where Lynette had once lived every day. Silas knew because it was filled with her scent. The little dog curled up into a ball and buried itself in the pillow. It didn't make a sound, just lay there quietly. Life seemed no different from before. Silas went to work, came home, ate, and lived his life day after day. The only thing missing was Lynette. He was an adult. He ate when he was hungry, drank when he was thirsty, and slept when he was tired. One morning, Nyen slipped out when he opened the door. It ran off and disappeared. He frantically searched everywhere. When he returned home that evening, he saw it crouched at the front door. Its black eyes looked at him. Then it lowered its head and whimpered twice. Silas picked it up and held it close, just like Lynette used to hold it. The lights were off in the house. It was pitch black. Silas held Nyen for a long time before sighing. She wouldn't blame him. She wouldn't want to see him again. The people at the company said Mr. Silas had changed. He wasn't colder, he was actually kinder. Mr. Silas used to be a man of few words, always with a stern expression. Lately, however, he had started smiling for no apparent reason. Even over the smallest things. He would gently praise you. The company was abuzz with speculation. If Mr. Silas weren't married, that smile would truly steal my soul. What had happened to Mr. Silas? Had he been possessed? How could he have changed so much? Could it be that Mr. Silas has been influenced by his wife? Mr. Silas's wife is a very beautiful woman. Whenever she sees them, she always smiles and is very gentle, yet very capable. Sometimes she comes by and greets them without any airs. Speaking of which, Lynn hasn't been here in a long time. Silas passed by the tea room and heard the sentence. Time seemed to pause in that moment. Silas stood at the door, unable to move. She wouldn't be coming back. Nyen still ran outside every day. In the afternoon, she waited at the front door for Silas to come home, then ran upstairs and into Lynette's room. Silas suddenly became curious. What did it do outside every day? He followed it, watching it take a detour to the park, where it found a sandpit, dug for a while, then left, following the same path back, and circled around the Greenwood community twice more. Then it went home, crouched at the front door, waiting for him to return. Silas didn't understand at first. Until one day, a little girl at the park patted it and asked softly, "Nyen, where's your sister?" Nyen barked twice and then fell silent. He suddenly understood. This was the path Lynette had taken with it every day. Lynette was gone. It kept walking. That day, Silas followed Nyen into Lynette's room. The puppy crawled under the desk and pulled out an empty bottle. Silas picked up the empty bottle and looked at it. It was labeled sleeping pills. He suddenly remembered the crossed-out words. "I can never go to Capri Island again. Goodbye, Silas." Lynette died that day. But Nyen saved her. The empty sleeping pill bottle, the scratches on the door, the tear-stained words, the unanswered text messages. And Lynette, who was supposed to die that day. The suppressed grief immediately turned into a flood, overwhelming him. Regret turned into a huge monster, swallowing him whole and chewing him over and over again. Silas collapsed on the ground, reliving the details of that day over and over again. It was like self-torture, repeating the memories. What the hell had he done? 3 days later, Zhou Yu finally knocked on his best friend's door. Tanya had sent Silas text messages and made calls, but he didn't respond to any of them. So she had no choice but to seek help from Zhou Yu. Zhou Yu stood at his door and knocked for 3 hours straight. Silas opened the door wearing only a white shirt stained with various alcohol stains. Startling Zhou Yu. The overwhelming smell of alcohol made him want to vomit. But fortunately, Silas only looked a little disheveled and smelled strongly of alcohol. His emotions were still relatively stable. As usual, he had a cold expression on his face, but he still seemed approachable. His friend entered the house without saying a word, and Zhou Yu followed behind him. The moment he saw the inside of the house, he almost burst out cursing. Stable my ass. The living room was filled with empty bottles of various kinds of alcohol. They were neatly stacked on the floor, not a single one out of place. Everything in the room was in order. Silas sat on the sofa, picked up a half-empty bottle of alcohol from the coffee table, and tilted his head back to drink. He's gone mad. Zhou Yu rushed forward and snatched the bottle from him. The colorless liquid poured all over Silas. He glanced at Zhou Yu, said nothing, and slowly reached into a box beside him to take out another bottle, preparing to open it. Silas, you're fucking crazy. You're still alive. You lucky bastard. And you're still drinking. Zhou Yu snatched the bottle away. But before he could say another word, he saw his friend collapse onto the sofa and close his eyes. What a fucking lunatic. When Silas woke up in the hospital, the first thing he saw was Zhou Yu by his side. His head was fuzzy, and he seemed to remember Zhou Yu yelling at him. Silas thought for a moment and only remembered that he had been drinking non-stop, going to the bathroom to vomit when he couldn't drink anymore, and then continuing to drink. But he never got drunk. Zhou Yu put down his phone and saw his friend lying on the bed, staring straight at him. His expressionless face was even more terrifying. Zhou Yu was furious. You bastard. Lynette left. The sudden words interrupted Zhou Yu's anger. His friend's voice was hoarse, like sandpaper rubbing against something. Left? Where did she go? His mind couldn't process it for a moment. Silas lowered his eyes. She's sick. What kind of illness? Pancreatic cancer. Zhou Yu fell silent. On our wedding anniversary, Tanya called me and said she was sick and asked me to come see her. When I was leaving, Lynette asked me not to go. I didn't answer. That night, she was home alone and took a lot of sleeping pills. Zhou Yu. Silas raised his eyes, his gaze as still as a pool of water. You say. What was she thinking when she sent me away? Zhou Yu remained silent. What was she thinking when she took the sleeping pills and lay in bed waiting for death? No one answered. The person on the bed suddenly sat up. Eyes red, voice hoarse and painful. It was unclear whether he was asking him or himself. You say. What would she have thought? Zhou Yu suddenly stood up. He walked out without looking back, and the ward door slammed shut with a loud bang. Only he was left inside. He stood there, dazed, staring at the white walls. Finally, he couldn't help but sob uncontrollably. After being discharged from the hospital, Silas quit his job. Every day, he accompanied Nian as they walked the paths they had once walked together. Day after day, year after year, he learned to cook following the recipes Lynette had written for him. From clumsy to skilled, but compared to what Lynette had made, it always felt lacking. Later, he too began to suffer from insomnia. When he couldn't sleep, he wooed through Lynette's old diaries. Every page had his name on it. He threw them over and over again. He cried and laughed. It turned out she had loved him so carefully for all those years. Later, Nian could no longer walk. It was a stray dog, with health issues all over its body, and its lifespan was short. If Lynette hadn't brought it home, it would have died in the winter 2 years later. It no longer went out, curling up into a small ball every day and lying on Lynette's pillow. Silas didn't go anywhere either. After eating, he would stay by its side. On the day Yen passed away, Silas was by its side. The little dog suddenly stood up shakily, barked twice toward a certain direction, then gave a silly smile, its tail wagging unsteadily. Silas tried to rush forward but fell back onto the bed, lying motionless. After a dozen seconds, it didn't move at all. Silas knew that Lynette had come to take it away.